Have you ever stopped to think that you might be your own worst professional saboteur? Yes, you, the one listening to this while searching for answers online. Let me guess. You complain about your life, dwell on the past, worry about the future, and unknowingly cling to habits that keep you stuck in unhappiness. But don't worry, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to open your eyes. In today's video, we'll break down the 10 errors that are ruining your happiness, often without you even realizing it. As the wise Stoic philosophers say, suffering doesn't come from what happens to us, but from how we choose to face it. So do you have the courage to look in the mirror and uncover what's truly holding you back? If you don't take this step now, tomorrow might just become another day filled with excuses. But before we dive in, listen to this story. It'll help you better understand the wisdom we'll explore here. Once upon a time in a bustling city, there was a man named Marcos, a talented carpenter admired by everyone in the neighborhood for his furniture. Yet Marcos carried an invisible burden. He constantly compared himself to other carpenters in town. One day, while working on a chair, he came across a photo of a colleague's piece on social media. Instead of appreciating his own work, he sighed and thought, "I'll never be as good as them." This idea lingered in his mind like an annoying buzz. Over time, Marcos began rushing his projects, trying to achieve the perfection he believed others had already mastered. But the more he pushed himself, the more dissatisfied he became. Small mistakes began to creep in, a loose screw here, a poorly measured cut there. Each slip-up fueled his frustration. One afternoon, his friend Raul visited the workshop and noticed Marcos's tense expression. "What's bothering you so much?" Raul asked. "I'm not good enough," Marcos replied with a heavy sigh. Raul paused, then pointed to a table Marcos had finished months earlier. "This table has hosted laughter, meals, and cherished memories in my home. I never thought it was poorly made. You see your mistakes because you look for flaws, but others see your talent." Those words struck a chord with Marcos. That evening, he realized he'd been carrying an invisible mistake. He had forgotten to value his own work. He was chasing external validation instead of recognizing his dedication and effort. From that day forward, Marcos began looking at his craft with fresh eyes. He didn't stop improving, but now he did it with joy, not comparison. The lesson here is that sometimes we carry invisible errors that make us unhappy. Whether it's comparing ourselves to others, seeking perfection, or depending on external approval, these habits weigh us down. When we stop doing this, we can find peace and happiness in who we are and what we do. Before we jump into the first lesson, if you find this kind of content helpful, I invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated with new insights. Let's begin. 1. Holding on to grudges. Have you ever had someone wrong you and you couldn't stop replaying it in your mind for days, weeks, or even years? Let me tell you something. This is one of the most effective ways to sabotage yourself. You might think you're wise for not forgiving or for holding on to that grudge. But the truth is, you're only harming yourself, and you might not even realize it. A grudge is like an anchor, keeping you stranded on an isolated island called resentment. No matter how justified you feel, all it really does is rob you of peace. Think about it. Holding a grudge is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Sounds ridiculous, right? Yet that's how we often behave. We cling to past hurts, reopening old wounds over and over, while forgetting to enjoy the present. It's a trap, a lie we tell ourselves to make it seem noble. I won't forget. I won't forgive. But the reality is, this attitude slowly drains your happiness. A grudge grows into a snowball, gaining size and weight until it crushes you. The Stoics, those philosophers who focused on inner strength, taught us not to waste energy lamenting what we can't control. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus. all shared a common wisdom. If you hold on to negativity, you're only harming yourself. They believed the only thing you truly control is your reaction to events. So, what's the solution? When someone hurts you, remember that while you can't change what happened, you can choose how to deal with it. If you keep replaying the incident, you'll lose energy, time, and even your health. The best way to move forward isn't to hold onto the grudge, but to shift your perspective. Start by acknowledging your feelings. Don't deny that you've been hurt, but don't let that pain define your story. Then recognize that you can't control others' actions, only how you respond. Forgiving doesn't mean giving someone a free pass. It's about freeing yourself from unnecessary baggage. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself. Finally, practice gratitude. When resentment starts creeping in, redirect your focus to the good things in your life. Write them down if that helps. It's a powerful way to shift your mindset and free up space for what truly matters. Remember, holding a grudge won't change the past. It'll only keep you trapped there. Dwelling on regrets. Have you spent your life obsessing over what you've done or failed to do? If so, let me tell you, you're stuck in the past, and that's what's making you unhappy. Regretting every wrong turn or missed opportunity may feel like a logical thing to do, but it's really just holding you prisoner to your own mistakes. We all make mistakes. You're not special in that regard. If anything, being special at making mistakes would just mean you'd feel even more isolated. What truly matters is how you respond to those errors. Dwelling on your past missteps is like staring at an outdated map, hoping to find directions for a place you're no longer in. The issue isn't the mistake itself, it's the time you spend agonizing over it. The Stoics would tell you the past is unchangeable, and they're right. You can regret something for hours, days, or years, but it won't turn back time or erase the decisions you made. The only thing you achieve by lamenting the past is feeding anxiety and preventing progress. So what can you do instead? Accept what you can't change. This is the first step. The Stoics emphasize this constantly. Don't torment yourself over what's out of your control. Focus instead on what you can influence. Your attitude, your future actions, and how you react to life's challenges. Start small. If you regret a bad decision from last year, reflect on it, but instead of wallowing in regret, use the experience to avoid repeating the mistake. Ask yourself, what can I do today to move forward, to grow? The choices you make now are what will shape your future. Next time you catch yourself ruminating on the past, remember this. Time is a limited resource, and you can't waste it living in the past. Let go of the discomfort, transform it into action, and keep moving forward. Because if you stay stuck on what could have been, you'll never see what could be. Worrying excessively about the future. Sometimes we spend so much time focusing on the future that it feels like we're trying to predict the unpredictable, as if we're holding a crystal ball. We convince ourselves that everything is preordained and that our destiny is carved in stone. But this is a trap, one that steals our peace of mind, often without us even noticing. Let me clarify something first. I'm not suggesting you disregard the future entirely or act irresponsibly. It's not about jumping blindly into the unknown without thinking about the consequences. Rather, it's about not getting stuck in a never-ending loop of anxiety over what hasn't even happened yet. The future is full of uncertainties. While we like to think we have control over it, the truth is we have no idea what's coming. Constantly worrying about what hasn't arrived yet is like running on a hamster wheel. You expend energy, but get nowhere. The Stoics, with their timeless wisdom, understood this well. They taught that the only thing we truly have control over is what we do in the present. The future is unpredictable, so why waste time worrying about what's beyond our reach? Instead, we should focus on what we have right now and act accordingly. Imagine standing on a bridge, looking down at a fast-moving river. You hesitate, wondering if the water is too cold. if the rocks below are slippery, or if you might not be able to swim to safety while you're stuck in your thoughts. The bridge remains unchanged, the river continues to flow, and you miss the chance to leap. Sound familiar? That's the trap of living in the future, always waiting for the perfect moment which never comes. So how do we avoid this mistake that quietly erodes our happiness? First, start paying attention to your thoughts. When you catch yourself worrying about something that might happen in the future, recognize that this thought likely doesn't make sense. Anxiety over what you can't control only drains you. Second, set clear goals for the present. Don't let fear of the future paralyze you. Take action now, even if it's a small step toward your goals. If you jump into the river with confidence, you'll find that what happens next doesn't matter as much. Lastly, let gratitude be your ally. Appreciate what you have today and trust that the future will shape itself naturally without you obsessing over it. Remember, the future is just an illusion that will rob you of the present if you allow it. Don't let that happen. As Marcus Aurelius wisely said, happiness isn't found in what's to come, but in what you already have today. 4. Living beyond your means. Have you ever felt like you're drowning in a glass of water, as if no matter how much effort you put in, it's never enough? Maybe you don't even notice, but it's quite possible that you're living beyond your means. And I'm not just talking about money. There's something deeper at play here. Something that leaves you feeling miserable, exhausted, and out of control, yet it feels so normal that you hardly realize it. Let's break this down. We live in a society that constantly bombards us with the idea that we need more money, more possessions, more status. It's as if having more were the ultimate solution to all our problems. And if you don't reach that more, you start to believe there's something wrong with you. But here's the truth. It's a lie. Living beyond your means isn't just about spending more than you have. It's also about overloading your life with commitments and unrealistic expectations, as if you were a superhero. Don't be fooled. We've all fallen into the trap of wanting to be more, expecting more from ourselves, and doing more. The problem is, when you try to do it all, you end up doing nothing well. It's like trying to fill a bag with a hole in it. Imagine you're running a race where the only competitor is yourself. The finish line is on the horizon, but along the way, you decide to pick up everything you find. Some stones, a backpack full of other people's expectations, and a handful of your own insecurities. At first, you might feel invincible, but over time, the weight begins to slow you down. This, my friend, is what happens when you live beyond your means. You don't notice the burden you're carrying until it's too heavy to bear. The Stoics can teach us something valuable here, the power of focusing only on what you can manage. They understood that true peace comes from accepting your limits, not from constantly trying to exceed them. So, how can you apply this wisdom? Start by being honest with yourself. Acknowledge that you can't do everything and that while you may not be perfect, you can still be enough. It's a mindset shift, a step back to gain clarity before moving forward. This isn't about being pessimistic or settling for mediocrity. On the contrary, it's about being realistic. Think of your life as a car. You can't put an airplane engine in it if the rest of the vehicle isn't built to handle that power. What can you do instead? Accept that speed isn't everything. Make more conscious decisions, focusing on doing fewer things, but doing them well. Evaluate your priorities. What truly matters to you? Where can you invest your time in a way that fulfills you rather than drains you? Make a list of what saps your energy and start cutting those things out. Saying no to certain commitments doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. Find balance, as the Stoics teach us. Peace comes from moderation. You don't need to be a superhero, you just need to be yourself. Often, success isn't about doing more, but about doing what's within your reach and doing it well. Practice. Gratitude and value what you already have instead of chasing what's beyond your grasp. The secret to happiness isn't in having more. It's in learning to thrive with what you have. Taking criticism the wrong way. Criticism often feels like someone throwing a ball at you, and instead of catching it, you just stand there until it hits you in the face. Sound familiar? That ball represents criticism, and it only stings if you don't know how to handle it. Most of the time, criticism arrives disguised as something negative. It's that feeling when someone points out, "You didn't do this right," and your first reaction is to get defensive. "Why don't they just leave me alone? Can't they see what I'm doing right?" Here's the trick though. Criticism isn't an enemy trying to destroy you. It's simply information in disguise. If you fail to recognize this, you risk falling into a victim mentality, blaming the world while ignoring your own role in the situation. The biggest mistake is thinking that criticism itself is what makes you unhappy. You might complain about it, but the real issue lies in how you receive it. Those moments when instead of seeing criticism as an opportunity to improve, you take it as a personal attack, those are the problem. Think about this. Criticism only has power over you if you allow it. As the Stoics taught, the only thing you can truly control is your reaction. Everything else is just noise. If that noise makes you unhappy, it's because you let it into your mind. So what can you do? The first step is simple but powerful. Stop taking everything personally. It's not always about you. Not everyone is out to make your life harder. Criticism is just a reflection of how someone perceives what you did. It doesn't define you. If that's hard to grasp, imagine you create a painting and someone says, "That's terrible." Does the painting itself feel offended? Of course not. It's the perception that causes the reaction. The second step is trickier. Learn to separate what you can control from what you can't. If someone criticizes you because something you did wasn't up to par, pause, take a deep breath, and reflect. Is there something I can do to address this? If yes, great, work on it. If no, why waste time dwelling on it? The Stoics would say, don't fight against the waves, navigate with them. In other words, accept what you can't change and focus on what you can learn. Accepting criticism isn't easy, and I'm not saying you have to be perfect at it. But once you start seeing criticism not as an attack on your identity, but as an opportunity to grow, you'll find peace in the middle of the storm. Don't let criticism derail you or make you feel worthless. Remember, the key isn't what others say, it's how you respond. As Gandhi once said, what others say about you only matters if you allow it. Take control of your mind, and criticism will become mere background noise. 6. Chronic complaining. Have you ever stopped to consider how often you complain? This isn't a judgment, just an observation. Complaining is like a mirror reflecting your unfiltered reality, showing the raw version of your frustrations. But here's the catch. While it might feel cathartic in the moment, complaining actually makes you far more unhappy than you realize. The problem with complaining is that it traps you in a vicious cycle. It starts small, an irritation here, a frustration there. Before you know it, complaining becomes a habit, and that habit shapes your view of the world. Instead of solving problems, you become an expert at spotting what's wrong without lifting a finger to change it. It's like standing in the middle of a tornado and whining about the wind instead of finding shelter. Sure, life isn't always fair, and it's okay to feel that way. But constant complaining gives you a false sense of control when in reality, you're just spinning your wheels. The Stoics warned against falling into this trap. They believed that instead of focusing on what you can't change, you should concentrate on what you can control. And here's the spoiler. What you can control is your reaction to life's circumstances, not the circumstances themselves. The first step to breaking this habit is awareness. Catch yourself in the act. It's like realizing you've been scrolling on your phone for hours with no purpose. Once you notice what you're doing, you can stop the cycle. After becoming aware, the next step is to replace complaints with action. Complaining keeps you stuck in paralysis, like a video game character grumbling about how hard the game is instead of picking up the controller. Take small actions, and you'll notice how the power of complaining starts to fade. Lastly, shift your focus. Instead of lamenting what you lack, reflect on what you have. Gratitude, no matter how small, can transform your perspective. It's like rain nourishing a dry field. It brings life to everything around it. And remember, to breathe. Life isn't a race, and not everything needs an immediate solution. Sometimes the best way to deal with a problem is to pause, take a deep breath, and view things calmly. When you do this, you'll find that many of your complaints have no real basis. The truth is, chronic complaining doesn't solve anything. It's like being stuck in a loop where unhappiness fuels your next complaint. If you really want to improve your life, take a step toward action and start owning your thoughts and reactions. There's no magic wand, just conscious decisions and a small shift in focus. Relying on addictions for happiness. Have you ever told yourself that something makes you happy, only to realize later that it was just a distraction from the real issues bothering you? It's fascinating how addictions often disguise themselves as sources of happiness, offering a quick fix wrapped in a shiny package, only to leave us feeling empty inside. And no, we're not just talking about drugs or alcohol. Addictions come in many forms: work, social media, external validation. All these little things that make us feel like we're moving forward, when in reality, we're just stuck in place. Addictions, in any form, are merely ways to avoid facing deeper problems. At first, they seem to offer a solution. A cigarette, a screen, an extra workload. They give you a fleeting sense of control. But if you look closely, you'll see that these habits are controlling you instead. It's not just about moments of weakness. It's a subtle cycle. I'll deal with it tomorrow, or just one more time won't hurt, becomes the invisible chain that keeps you tied to the behavior. The Stoics teach us that while we can't control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. Addictions rob us of this power by convincing us that happiness lies in something external, beyond our control, when the truth is, the key is always within us. Imagine you have a safe. Instead of filling it with valuable thoughts and emotions, you cram it with useless things: old clothes, forgotten bills, memories that no longer serve you. That's how addictions work. They fill our mental space with clutter, leaving no room for growth or fulfillment. It's tempting because addictions have an appealing side. They offer a momentary sense of relief, a brief pause where everything feels right. But when the high fades, you realize you're stuck in a cycle that leads nowhere. It's like patching a leaking boat. It might not sink immediately, but the water will eventually seep in. So what's the solution? It's not about eliminating addictions overnight. That's rarely realistic. But with a little willpower and a lot of awareness, you can start observing yourself. Ask yourself, what is this really giving me? Do I truly need this? Or more importantly, what am I avoiding by clinging to this? When you identify the root of your addiction, you'll find it easier to question its grip on you and, little by little, let it go. In the end, addictions are just errors disguised as quick fixes. They trick you into believing they're saving you, but all they really do is feed your anxiety. As one wise Stoic said, true freedom begins when we stop being slaves to our own illusions. It's not about instantly cutting out everything that feels good, but about understanding that happiness isn't in what you consume, it's in what you're able to release. 8. Gossiping about others. Have you ever stopped to think about how much time you spend talking about other people? And I'm not referring to harmless conversations with friends. I mean those moments when you sit down and start criticizing someone, judging their choices, their appearance, or even their personality. Gossip sneaks in unnoticed, but leaves behind a heavy toll. The truth is, gossip isn't just a bad habit. It's a mistake that distances you from inner peace. It's like indulging in junk food. You know it's not good for you, but it's easier than preparing something nourishing. Criticizing others gives a fleeting sense of superiority, as if pointing out someone else's flaws elevates you. But in reality, it doesn't. The Stoics teach us that what others think or do shouldn't concern us. Instead, they encourage us to focus on what we can control, ourselves. When you waste time fixating on others, you lose energy that could be spent on your own personal growth. Ask yourself, what do you really gain by knowing what someone else is doing wrong? Does it bring you peace? Make you happier? Help you become a better person? Probably not. Gossip drains you and keeps you from addressing what truly matters, your own progress. Breaking the gossip cycle isn't as hard as it seems. The key is awareness. The next time you find yourself caught in a conversation tearing someone down, ask yourself, is this helping me grow? If the answer is no, stop feeding into it. Change the topic, or better yet, walk away. Another Stoic practice is indifference. Don't dwell on what you can't change. If someone is doing something you dislike, simply notice it and move on. Protect your peace of mind, and you'll find that everything else loses significance. Remember, talking about others won't make you happy. It only drains you and keeps you from focusing on what truly matters. Follow the Stoic example. Happiness doesn't depend on what others do, but on how you manage your own reactions. As the Stoics would say, when you stop talking about others, you start finding yourself. 9. Letting fear guide your decisions. Sometimes, without even realizing it, we make decisions that don't benefit us at all. Often, these choices are driven by fear. From a young age, we are told that fear is natural, that it protects us. While that's partially true, fear can also do more harm than good. It can trap us in patterns that make us unhappy, even if we're not aware of it. Fear often masquerades as wisdom, a false protector warning you of risks, when in reality, it's stealing your well-being. Imagine standing before an opportunity, a new job, a life change, or even a relationship. Everything seems ideal, but deep down, you feel anxious and unsure. That's fear speaking. The question is, will you let fear decide for you? Because if you do, you might end up choosing regret instead of growth. The Stoics frequently discussed how emotions like fear affect us. To them, fear wasn't something to avoid entirely. It was something to understand and manage. Instead of blindly following fear, they taught us to pause and question it. The key is realizing that not everything that scares you is genuinely dangerous. A large part of the fear we feel exists only in our minds. First, pause. If fear is consuming you, take a moment to breathe. Don't make impulsive decisions. Fear has a way of pushing us into rash actions, and those decisions often lead us down the wrong path. When you create space between the fear and your reaction, you'll notice that what seemed threatening may actually be nothing more than a shadow cast by your imagination. Second, write down your fears. It may sound strange, but putting them on paper helps you see them clearly. Often, you'll find they're exaggerated or even baseless, like a monster that seemed terrifying in the dark, but turns out to be nothing. In the light of day, finally, do the opposite of what fear tells you. It sounds counterintuitive, but when you take the step fear is trying to stop, you discover that life often rewards courage. It's like jumping into cold water. Your legs tremble at first, but once you're in, you wonder why you didn't do it sooner. Fear is not your ally, even though it pretends to be. It leads you to make mistakes that quietly rob you of happiness. The Stoics remind us that emotions shouldn't control us. We should control them. So the next time fear tries to take over, remember that you're the one in charge. And if what you want lies on the other side of fear, why stay behind? Life won't wait for you to have all the answers. As scary as it feels, taking that leap could be the start of something incredible. 10. Making problems bigger than they are. Have you ever taken a tiny issue and turned it into a massive disaster? Maybe you lost your car keys and started imagining sleeping on the street, or you had a bad day at work and convinced yourself you'd be fired by the afternoon. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. We're experts at taking small problems and blowing them out of proportion. Why? Because we assume the worst will always happen. We spiral into these mental catastrophes as if suffering earns us some kind of medal. But here's the truth. 99% of the time, problems aren't as big as they seem. The Stoics knew this well. They taught that it's not what happens to us that causes suffering, it's how we react to it. Losing your keys doesn't hurt you, the storm of negative thoughts around that loss does. Instead of focusing on what's within your control, you obsess over worst-case scenarios. It's like looking for cracks in a perfectly solid wall. And when you don't find any, you decide to create them yourself. So how do you stop making mountains out of molehills? Start by putting things into perspective. Think about times when you've exaggerated a problem. Was all that stress really worth it? Probably not. Next, take a deep breath. Step back and look at the situation from a distance. Does it still seem like the end of the world? Most likely not. As the Stoics suggested, accept what you can't change and work with what you can control. Another helpful technique is to imagine the worst-case scenario and ask yourself if it's truly as bad as it seems. If you were fired, for instance, would your life be ruined forever? Probably not. It might be a challenge, but it could also open doors to new opportunities. Life is already filled with real challenges. There's no need to add imaginary ones. Do yourself a favor. Apply logic and perspective to your problems. Stop turning minor inconveniences into epic tragedies. The Stoics understood that what makes us unhappy isn't the error itself, but how we choose to view it. Remember, obstacles don't have to be insurmountable. They're just bumps in the road. As Carl Jung once said, problems don't exist beyond our minds. They're like shadows that vanish with the first ray of sunlight. I sincerely hope this message has been helpful. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You're demonstrating a genuine desire to improve yourself. That alone is a huge step forward. Remember, identifying and addressing these common mistakes, like holding grudges, dwelling on the past, fearing the future, or letting external factors dictate your happiness, is the path to a more peaceful and fulfilling life. The wisdom of Stoicism teaches us that our true power lies in how we react, not in what happens to us. If you enjoyed this content, please share your thoughts in the comments. Not sure what to write? Simply comment gratitude to let me know you made it to the end. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, what are you waiting for? Join us to continue learning and growing. The journey to inner peace and happiness is ongoing, and Stoicism offers countless lessons to help along the way. To dive deeper into this philosophy, I've included 2 other videos packed with practical Stoic wisdom. I encourage you to keep exploring. Until next time, stay strong, stay mindful, and keep moving forward.